Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Rosh Hashana Daf Lamed Aleph contains one Mishnah. The Daf begins with a list of which Shira the Levium sang each day of the week and for the specific Karbanos of Shabbos. The Daf then discusses the migration of the Sanhedrin, where it moved from place to place. This is part of our discussion of the special Takanos that Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted at Yavneh, so we discuss why the Sanhedrin was at Yavneh. The Gemara will list the 10 places that the Sanhedrin stopped at, and along with that, the 10 levels of departure of the Shechina from the Beis Hamikdash, precedent to the Chorban. Then we'll get to the Mishnah, which will introduce the last of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai's Takanas, and the Gemara will list all of them and what the rest of them are, the ones that we haven't learned so far. So let's begin. So the Gemara first says, what is the Shira that the Levim used to sing? So the Gemara first goes through the Shira of the 7 days of the week and the reason for each of them. So the Gemara says for Sunday it was L'Hashem Artzum Loya Tehillim Chav Daled, because this is the day that Hashem created the world. He created the entire universe, and he left Shemayim for the Elyonim, and he gave over the lower land, and he was ruler over it all. So it's all about Hashem Ha'aretz U'Maya. He is the ruler over all of it. The Monday is the Tehillim Memches, which is Gadol Hashem U'Malo Ma'od, because that Tehillim speaks about the division of upper and lower, Yerushalayim and the rest of Eretz Yisrael, and so that is the day where the division of the Shemayim and Aretz is appropriate to be sung about. The third day, Tuesday, is Elokim Nitzav Badas Kel, because that was the time that Hashem set apart earth. He exposed earth by revealing it, and this is also discussed, that theme, in the Tehillim of Hashem Nitzav Badas Kel, which is Tehillim Pei Veis. Now, the fourth day of the week was Kel Nakamis Hashem, because that is the day that the sun and the moon were created and people used to serve them. So Hashem took revenge on those people at the time of the Chorban, and that's Kel Nakamis Hashem. The fifth day was Harninu Elokim Uzeinu, because that's singing praises to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That was the Hashem created the fish and the birds and their multitudes. And when a person sees that, that is when he is filled with Shira. The sixth day was Hashem Malach Geilos Lavesh. That is the day when Hashem's Malchus is fully firm, because the Adam was created and he can accept the Kadosh Baruch Hu as king, and therefore that's a Tehillim that sings about his Melucha. And the last day is Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos. Now the Gemara brings the Machlokes as to why Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos was sung on the 7th day. The Gemara's first approach in this first brisa is that it is a reference to the 7th set of 1,000 years in which the world will be empty, desolate, like Shabbos. It'll be empty. Different versions in the Chazal and the Rishonim as to what this means. Perhaps it'll be empty of challenges, perhaps it'll be empty of people, but it'll be the Shabbos 1,000 years of the universe. The second explanation comes from another brisa, which goes to the entire list again. The Gemara brings the entire list again, and this one is given by Rav Nechemi. He says it's referring to the day of Shabbos itself. It's not referring to the 7,000 years. It's referring to the day of Shabbos, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu rested on the 7th day. So what is the machlokes between these two approaches, whether it's referring to the 7th day or the 7th set of 1,000 years of the universe? Of course, this is arguing over Rav Katina. As Rav Katina said that the entire universe stood for 6,000 years. At the end of 6,000 years, there'll be a 7th thousand, and that'll be the Shabbos of the universe. And the other approach to that, the one who argues on that, is Abaye, and he says that it'll be 2,000 years in which the world is charav, in which the world is destroyed. If it's 2,000 years, it cannot be symbolized by the 7th day, by the Yom HaShabbos, because it's 2 sets of 1,000 years, and not 1 set of 1,000 years. Alright, now the Gemara moves on to what did the Levim sing for Musaf on Shabbos. So the Gemara says it's the song which is symbolized by the Rosh Tevos Haziv L'cha. Hey Zayin Yud Vav Lamed Chaf, and there's different explanations in Shonim as to what this means. Rashi says this is the 6 aliyahs of Parshas Hazinu. Hazinu Hashomayim V'Adaber is the Hey, is the first one, and then comes Zechor Yemos Olam, the Zayin, Yud is Yarkiveo Abom Masei Oretz. Vav is Vayar Hashem Vayinatz. And then there's two more that are each 8 psukim, Lulikas Oyev Ogor, and Ki Yodin Hashem Ameh. So those are the 6 aliyahs. The Gemara says that just as it's split up this way in the 6 shiras, it's also split up in the 6 aliyahs. You cannot change the aliyahs in Hazinu. It has to be set up that way. Now, what was sung by Mincha, by the Karban Shel Bein Arbayim on Shabbos? So the Gemara says there were 3 shiras for that. There's Oz Yashir, that's the Shiras Hayam. That's the first half of Shiras Hayam until the pasuk of Mika Meicha. Then the second shira was Mika Meicha till the end, and the third shira is V'az Yashir. That's Shiras HaBe'er, the Kal Yisrael saying on the Be'er Shel Miriam. So now the Gemara says that we have 6 songs for Musaf and 3 songs for Mincha. Were they all sang every Shabbos, or was it a rotation and they went from one to the next on a 6 Shabbos cycle? So where the Brisa makes it clear that it was a rotation, because the Brisa says that the Musaf cycle was finished once in the time that the Mincha cycle was finished twice. Therefore, it was a cycle, and the Mincha cycle was only 3, so it was finished twice in the time that it took to finish the Musaf cycle, which was a cycle of 6. All right, now the Gemara goes to the Gullus of the Shechina and the Gullus of the Sanhedrin. The Shechina had 10 stops, 10 levels in which it moved away from Klal Yisrael until it finally departed, and the Sanhedrin had 10 stops along its exile path as well. It had 10 movements, not necessarily for exile, but most of them were caused by persecution of our enemies. So the Gemara says the stops of the Shechina are learned from Psukim. The stops of the Sanhedrin we know from Gemara, from tradition. And the Gemara goes through each list. So the stops of the Shechina, the Gemara says, first of all, the Shechina started off on the Kaporos, like it says, V'nei adati l'chol Hashem v'dibarti idchem me'al HaKaporos. Kaporos being the cover of the Aron, between the Kruvim. Then it moved to the one of the 2 Kruvim. That is, Shlomo HaMelech made 2 Kruvim standing on the floor near the Aron, one on each side. So it moved first from the Kaporos to one of them. Like it says, Vayarkev al Kruv v'ya'of. Then it moved to the other one, like it says, Kvod Hashem u'Kvod Elokei Yisrael nale me'al hakruv. And then it went to the other kruv, and from there it went to the threshold of the heichol, or possibly of the Kodesh Kodashim, Achalakas Rishonim, and that's because it says in the pasuk nale me'al hakruv asher hoya olav el miftan habayis. It went to the threshold. Now from there it went to the chutzner, went to the courtyard, like it says, V'yamali habayis is anav ha'chutzner mala is noiga. And the courtyard was filled with light. The Chatzar Mala is Naga Kvod Hashem. From the Chatzar went to the Mizbeach, like it says, where Itzias Hashem Mitzav Hal Mizbeach, Hashem was standing on the Mizbeach. From the Mizbeach it went to the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, like it says, Tov L'Shavas Alpinas Gag. It's good to sit on the corner of the roof. From the Gag went to the wall. It's the wall of Yerushalayim. That's the wall of the Azara, the wall of the Beis HaMikdash, like it says, V'hina Hashem Nitzav Achoimas Anach, Hashem is standing on a straight wall. From the wall of the Beis HaMikdash, it went to the city of Yerushalayim, like it says, Kol Hashem Le'ir Yikra, Hashem's voice calls out to the city. From the city, it went to the mountain, that's Har Zeisim. It went to Har Zeisim, which is near Yerushalayim, like it says, V'al Kvod Hashem Me'al Tocha Ir V'yamod Al Hahar Asher Mikedem. And the Kvod of Hashem went up from the city and stood on the mountain to the east. From there it went to the Midbar, out into the desert, as it says, Tov L'Shavas Ba'aretz, Ba'aretz Midbar. It's good to sit in the Midbar. Now, in the Midbar it stayed for 6 months, the Gemara says, waiting for Klal Yisrael to do tshuva. Klal Yisrael did not do tshuva. Hashem said, Eine Rishayim Tachlena, Monos Avad Min Hom. Tikvasam mipach nefesh, and Klal Yisrael are going to deserve what they get for not doing tshuva. And then it went up to Shemayim, as the pasuk says, Elech Oshiva El Makomi, I'll go back to where I belong. Now the Sanhedrin had 10 stops, and the Gemara says they are as follows. First of all, they were in the Lishkas Hagazis, a special chamber of cut stone, which is partially in the Azara, because the Sanhedrin was supposed to sit in the Beis HaMikdash in the Azara. All the time they were there, they were Dinin Nefashos, both there and in all the courts around there. It's at 23 Dayanim or more. But at some point, the Sanhedrin saw that they have to cancel the judgment of Dinin Nefashos because it's becoming too difficult for the Batei Din to keep up with. And therefore, they moved out of Lishkas Hagazis. Once they're not in Lishkas Hagazis, nobody could judge Dinin Nefashos anymore. And they moved to a chanus, to a store. So one of the storefronts that was on the Har HaBayis. From there, they moved to Yerushalayim. From Yerushalayim, they moved to Yavne. Yavne to Usha, which is in the north. Usha back to Yavne. Yavne back to Usha. Usha to Shafram, which is also in the north. All these movements, Rashi explains, when the Rosh Sanhedrin, the head of the Beis Din, moved, the Sanhedrin moved with him. And the Rosh Sanhedrin had to move different times, sometimes based on persecution, sometimes based on his health. Rebbe had to move for his health. Rav Yochanan, Rabban Gamliel, and his son moved from place to place. Anyway, from Shafram, it went to Beit Sha'arim. Beit Sha'arim went to Tzipari. From Tzipari, went to Tveria. All these places were under Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Tveria, says the Gemara, was the lowest of them all. Sanhedrin's kavod dropped for each time it moved, and this was the lowest of them all, as it says in the pasuk V'shafalta Meretz Tidbari. Rabbi Eliezer, says the Gemara, has a different version. He says there were only 6 exiles of Sanhedrin. Like the pasuk says, Ki asach yoshvei maram kirya nizgava yashbilena yashbila ad aretz yagiena ad afar. The 6 phrases here, asach is one, yashbilena is the second one, yashbila is the third one, ad aretz is the fourth one, yagiena is the fifth one, ad afar is the 6th one. Those are the 6 stops. Now it says of Yechanan, in the future, Sanhedrin will be redeemed and rescued from Tveria. Like it says, Hisnari me'afar, shake yourself off from the dirt, kumi shavi, get up and go back to the time of redemption. Alright, now we get to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah lists another one of Rav Yeshua ben Zakkai's takanas, things that Rav Yeshua ben Zakkai instituted. So Rav Yeshua ben Karcha says it. He says Rav Yeshua ben Zakkai instituted that wherever the Rosh Beis Din went, although the rule was that wherever the Rosh Beis Din went, the Sanhedrin had to follow, that did not apply to Kiddush HaChodesh. To accept witnesses to testify to the appearance of the new moon, did not have to follow the Rosh Beis Din, even though the Rosh Sanhedrin was supposed to be the one to say Mekudesh. They did not want to make the witnesses have to follow him. They didn't want to make it hard for them, so they shouldn't be discouraged from coming next time. And therefore, they just had to go to where the Sanhedrin was, did not have to follow, and somebody else would say Mekudesh. If the Rosh Sanhedrin was nearby, they would call him and he would come say Mekudesh. Otherwise, somebody else would say it. So the Gemara begins. The Gemara brings an incident that happened where a woman was called to court. She was in a monetary lawsuit with somebody else. She was the one who was claimed against. She had borrowed money from somebody. And she was called to court in front of a Meimar in the city of Narda. And a Meimar went to Mechuzah. So this woman refused to follow. She said, no, I came here and I don't have to follow you to Mechuzah. So a Meimar wrote a document of excommunication against her. She had refused to follow the order of the court. She refused to appear before the Beis Din. Versus Rav Ashi said to Meimar, what do you mean? We learned in our Mishnah that you don't have to follow the court. You don't have to follow the head of the court wherever he goes. So why are you saying she's refusing to appear? So Meimar said, no, that only refers to Kiddush HaChodesh, where we wanted to save the witnesses the trouble in order to not discourage them from coming again. However, this situation, this woman borrowed money. Anybody who borrows money is in the lower position. You made yourself subservient by taking a loan, and therefore she is responsible to follow the other litigant to wherever it is that he would like to hold the court case, even all the way here to Naharda. Alright, now the Gemara says that there are another takana of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was that Kohanim who go up to the Duchen to do Berachos Kohanim should not wear shoes. Gemara doesn't give the reason. The reason is because they shouldn't sit down in order to fix their shoes if they break, which happened often, and it would look like they were not proper Kohanim if they went down from the Duchen. Okay, now, the Gemara says that there were 9 takanas in all that Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai made. There were 6 which we learned in this chapter. Those are the 6, that's this one we just learned here, that you don't have to follow the Av Beis Din for Sanhedrin. The other 5 were that they should blow shofar around Eretz Yisrael, even on Shabbos and any place that has a Beis Din. That Lulav should be taken all 7 days outside Eretz Yisrael after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. That after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the entire day of the Karban HaOmer was all forbidden to eat from the new grain. That they went back to accepting testimony from witnesses to the new moon on Rosh Hashanah all day. Those are the 6. The Gemara says, what are the other ones? So the Gemara says, the 7th one we have just seen, that's the one with the Kohanim's shoes. The 8th one, the Gemara says we had listed earlier in the Masechta, which is that we're only machal Shabbos to testify for the new moon for Rosh Chodesh Tishrei and Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And the ninth one thing where it says Machakas between Rav Papa and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, what it is precisely. Rav Papa says it was that he repealed the rule that Kerem Ravai has to be brought to Yerushalayim even within 1 day's travel. The halacha is that Kerem Ravai, the crops of the 4th year of a tree being planted, has a special kedusha, and it can be either redeemed, and the money can be brought to Yerushalayim, or it itself could be brought to Yerushalayim and eaten there. Now, Midaraisa, the rule is it could be redeemed anywhere, even one step outside Yerushalayim. The Rebbeinu instituted, though, that within a day's travel, everybody should bring it to Yerushalayim in order that the marketplace of Yerushalayim should have a lot of fruit and should be in good shape, as a market decree. The Gemara gives the borders of that 1 day's travel. The Gemara says in the south it's Eilat, in the north it's Akravas, in the west it's Lud, and in the east it's Jordan. So Gemara says that decree, that rule, Midrabanan, was repealed by Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. And that's Rav Papa's pshat and what the ninth takana is. How does he know it? So Gemara says that he gets it from an incident that happened, that Rabbi Eliezer wasn't feeling well and he couldn't bring all his Kerem Ravai, his 4th year of grapes, to Yerushalayim, and he wanted to be mafkid, wanted to leave it for the poor people, that they should bring it to Yerushalayim. As Talmidim said, your chaverim already were matir this takana, they already repealed this decree, and you're allowed to redeem it on your own. You don't have to leave it for the poor people. So who are these chaverim? Who's it referring to? It's referring to Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. That's Rav Papa's pshat. Says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, it can't be referring to Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was the Rebbe of Rabbi Eliezer, not a chaver. But Rav Papa says no, it's no problem that he was called a chaver by the Talmidim of Rabbi Eliezer, even though he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Eliezer, because it was not kavod for Rabbi Eliezer's Talmidim to tell him your Rebbe already was metaking this. Instead, they said your chaver, referred to him as a chaver, as a manner of kavod to their own Rebbe. Now, what is Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak's opinion? He says that Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai's 9th takana was the rule that the strip of red wool which was tied around that was tied, hanging in the Beis Hamikdash, that was removed. What happened was that on Yom Kippur, the goat that was sent Azazel had half a strip of red wool tied around his horns, and the other half was hung on the door of the Heichal. And when the goat was pushed off the cliff of Azazel, so sometimes the strip of red wool hanging in the Heichal would turn white. That would be a sign that Kal Yisrael's Averos were all forgiven, and everybody was happy. And sometimes it would stay red, or even get redder, and that would be a sign that they were not forgiven. Now, the Gemara says that there were times when it was white every year, and there were times it was sometimes red and sometimes white, and people would get nervous if it stayed red. And so Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was metaking that they should put it inside the Azara so that people shouldn't see it, but people were still seeing it. They were peeking inside. They were finding ways to see it. So he was metaking that they should take it along with the goat to Azazel, and this half should be tied on a rock before they pushed him down. It should be tied on a rock so they shouldn't have any of these people being concerned. Possibly the problem was when it stayed white, people said, okay, everything's fine, and they ignored the rest of Yom Kippur. Possibly the problem was that people got too sad and upset. Yom Kippur is a Yom Tov when it stayed red, so that was a problem. So Gemara says that this is Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak pshat. Rav Papa doesn't like it because we have a brayso that says that the last 40 years in the Beis Hamikdash stood, it never turned white. And this brayso discussing this procedure where they changed the strip, whether it was on the Heichal, or was inside, or was on the rock, the brayso doesn't spell out who it was that changed the rules, but it does say that it was because it was sometimes red and sometimes white. Now, the last 40 years of the Beis Hamikdash, we know it was always red. And it couldn't have been Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai then, because Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai lived to be 120. And a brayso says the first 40 years he was working, he was busy with business. The next 40 years he was a Talmud. 40 years after that he was a leader and he was metakein takanos. And we know that Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai lived until after the times of the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, because a lot of his takanos were what to do after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So therefore, the 40 years in which he was being metakein takanos and he was a leader began within the last 40 years of the Beis Hamikdash, and within the entire last 40 years of the Beis Hamikdash, the strip stayed red. And therefore, this brayso which said it was sometimes red and sometimes white, and therefore the rules were changed, could not have been Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was being metakein takanos at that time. He didn't start being metakein takanos until the last 40 years of his life, which was later. So Gemara says, no, it's not a problem. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was metaken these when he was a Talmud. He was a Talmud, and he told his Rebbe, who he sat before, look, here's the problem, here's my proposed solution, and his Rebbe instituted it, and he called it on his name because it was his idea, and it was his suggestion.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.